Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sound Off right here on WJMS Radio or WJMS Media. Oh, old habits die hard, y'all. This is your girl Jams. I am so excited to be with you today. I have a really good show for you. As obviously I am an advocate for lung cancer because it's near and dear to my heart, being as though I have my own diagnosis and I'm navigating my own complicated, twisted journey with it. But I have a special guest today who actually reached out to me from some of the advocacy that I'm doing. And so I'm really excited to talk to this woman today. Before we get into the conversation, we are live on Facebook and YouTube as well, in both of our Facebook group and our Facebook page. So anybody who has questions, comments, you want to drop in and leave some love, anything like that, feel free to go ahead and drop a comment in the chat on either of those two platforms. We'll be able to see them and I'll try to fold them into the conversation as we go. Make sure that you allow StreamYard access to your profile. Otherwise, you just come up as Facebook user or YouTube user. And, if you want us to be able to say your name and give you your shout out, definitely make sure you allow access so that your name will pop up on the screen as well. Also, make sure you check us out on our social media pages. Again, it's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and TikTok. We are on TikTok as well. And if you want to check out some more of the video content, we have a YouTube page also where mostly our archives from our shows are staying and living for the time being, but there is more to come. So make sure you stay tuned on that. And also, I want to thank the folks behind the scenes that make WJMS Media possible, to the folks that support us, listen to us, tune in, share our, content and whatnot, and engage with us. We really, really appreciate it. So without further ado, I want to bring on the screen today Miss Yolanda Brunson-Sarabo, and she is a petite powerhouse, but she's made a name for herself, and she's a force to be reckoned with in the fashion industry. She's a sourcing production whiz in the private label and manufacturer business. She's the founder and president of Spitfire Productions. She's producer, writer, executive director for the Lung Cancer's Inhale Hope, Exhale Stigma PSA. She's the author of two books, not one but two: The Ins and Outs of the Fashion Industry from a Fashion Insider and Another Face of Multiple Myeloma. Spitfire Productions is the umbrella of her multi brands, and her group works with new designers and authors who wish to enforce strategies in building their fashion brands. Yolanda is a brand herself and runs her business to reflect her passion and her creations. And she has formed a movement. And she, her life takes new turns and she learns more about her Mad About Myeloma movement. She is definitely somebody that I am excited to bring on screen with me today. So, Yolanda, welcome to the show. And how you doing this evening?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so good. I'm happy to see you, and I'm really excited that we got to set this up. I was really happy when you reached out to me.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
nervous.
No, 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 no. Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. It's like a conversation between friends. So I wanted to, I gave a little bit of an intro for you and a little bit of your biography, but why don't you give the audience a little bit more of an in-depth biography as to, sort of where you came from, where you grew up and stuff like that, and then we'll dive into your journey.
Okay, sure. So, hello, everyone. My name is Yolanda. So, I'm a Brooklynite, New Yorker.
Okay.
Um, Love Brooklyn. Born in Brooklyn. Um, have gone to school in Brooklyn. Obviously, went to FIT. I studied marketing. I have two degrees. I have a marketing degree as well as fashion merchandise. So I also went to Kingsborough Community College when they did have a fashion program many moons ago. And I've been in the industry over 20 years, whether it's technical design, product development, production management, a little bit of everything, working with a lot of vendors around the world, factories around the world. Um, I've worked with outerwear, activewear, children's, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So I'm not doing that anymore.
Oh, no?
No, I'm not doing that anymore. So I kind of help other businesses that kind of want to leg up as to what they should consider if they're trying to do their own clothing brand. And so, yeah. So a bit of what a lot of what you just said is kind of what when I'm doing, like, basically you could say I'm an entrepreneur. What is it? What is the word they call it now? A serial
A real
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's the new word.
Oh, man, okay. So, well, why I mean, you said you've been in the industry for 20 years and you're no longer doing that. So what made you leave in the first place? Was it something especially if you went to school for it?
Well, I've had many jobs, so it hasn't like just been one company per se. So the last job that I was at, there was like a layover, which was actually a good thing because that kind of spiraled, as we'll talk about in terms of like a different treatment method that I was on. But I guess we'll get to that. So that was kind of a good thing as to start that particular treatment. Um, but yeah, it was time. It was time.
When you
But
know,
for
you know.
anyone who knows, the fashion industry is very fast paced, is very stressful because sometimes you think it's like, okay, could this have been the reason that sparked the issues that I later, got into? So yeah,
Okay. Well, that all makes sense. And when you know, you know. When you know it's time to go, it's time to exit stage left.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
the elephant in the room, of course, is well, before we get into that, you reached out to me via email because I guess you had seen or heard my story through the Heal Network, I believe. And so I wanted to just kind of touch base a little bit about that and talk about that because I just got involved with the Heal Collaborative, which for those folks who are new to the program or new to WJMS Media, they are an organization out in Atlanta here that is really trying to bridge the gap between education about a lot of these diseases, not just lung cancer, but lung cancer is near and dear to their hearts, but just bridge the discussion about stigmas in the Black community, and they're trying to do it through the foundation, if you will, of the Black community, which is the church. And so they're folding in a lot of pastors and folks in the community churches that we all know how it is. If Pastor Johnson or Pastor whoever says, X, Y, and Z, the congregation is going to kind of follow. For centuries, it's kind of been how the Black community gets there. It's almost like our newspaper, if you will, or our news
Hmm.
outlet is the church. And that's where we, our families go, our kids grow, they grow up. We've been around these people our whole lives, and we're united by this love for religion, and a love for Christ and a love for each other and brotherhood and just fellowship. And so the Heal Collaborative is really trying to capitalize on that connection, not necessarily capitalize, that's not the right word, but to create opportunities to sort of work with the connection that the churches have in the community to really bring education about things that are affecting us, lung cancer being one of those main things. And so they had an event a couple of weeks ago that I was speaking at, and I believe that's sort of how you got affiliated with me. But you reached out to want to bring me on your show, and I was like, hey, hold on a minute, you have a story to tell, so let me bring you on my show. And so I want to give you the opportunity to talk about your diagnosis, talk about your journey. I guess start at the beginning, if you will, and just let us know where all this came from. When did you get diagnosed with multiple myeloma? And just what has your journey looked like thus far, with what you have going on?
Okay, well, oh man, it's been a journey. It's been many, many, many years. However, I'm blessed because I'm still here. You know, I think um so to start off, just a little bit of what multiple myeloma is. Okay, multiple myeloma is a cancer that forms in a type of white blood cells called plasma cells. So basically, healthy plasma cells help fight infections. If we get, sick or something, it helps us.
Hmm.
However, in multiple myeloma, cancerous plasma cells, which again helps us fight infections, they accumulate in the bone marrow. And what it is like a fight with the healthy blood cells along with the cancerous plasma cells. And they kind of squeeze out the healthy blood cells. So some of the results um, of myeloma would be anemia, calcium levels, renal issues, and perhaps bone issues, which they use an acronym called CRAB. So it's calcium, renal, anemia, and bone. Um, and of course, multiple myeloma is a common blood cancer within the Black community. Wouldn't you
Mhm.
know? And it's twice as deadly, however, for Black people than it is for white, because we're twice as likely to get diagnosed with this disease. So, many moons ago, I was minding my business, and with a doctor, which I guess maybe we can get into that. I was very astute when it came to doctor's appointments, you know. Um, so your yearly checkup, your primary doctor, they do the blood work, you
Mhm.
know. That's really the biggest purpose, quite frankly, to have your primary doctor, because unless you have any other aches and pains or whatever, but it's that blood work that kind of highlights if there's issues. So my doctor called, he was pretty good as to call to say, okay, cholesterol is good, blah, blah is good, whatever, whatever. So
Yep.
he said, we have a problem. Your protein levels is high. So I don't recall the numbers, but I know it was in the thousands and it shouldn't have been in the thousands. That part
That's
I know.
bad. Yeah.
So he was talking like there was like stuff happening within my life. And like I tell a few people when I tell the story, we were getting ready to go on a vacation, my husband and I. So I was not thinking about what this doctor was telling me. However, the week before we left, he called like I guess the week, I guess so maybe it was a 2 week gap.
Mhm.
So the following week he called again. And the first call was on a weekend, the second call was also on a weekend. And he was like, well, have you found a hematologist? So I was like, no. He said, well, this is serious because when I told you a week ago, you know, obviously it's something going on.
Yeah.
So that was so appreciative of him being on top of it, because sometimes I know it's a gamble what doctor you get, and if they do their due diligence to make that call, or maybe they have their nurse or the front desk, oh, the doctor says so, so you just never know what you get. So it was appreciative that he followed up, because he could have easily after that first call and said, oh, you didn't do that, like a year later, but I told you to do that, you know what I'm saying? So he
Yep.
called, he was on it. So he told me to find a hematologist. As I tell the story, hematologist, what is a hematologist? Okay, so you kind of just break the word, the Greek part of it, okay, hema, blood,
Mhm.
and you kind of figure out the rest, you know. So I found a doctor, and it was kind of rare to first to see a Black woman young, because I was in my mid 30s,
Wow.
okay, when I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
So rather young. This is a cancer that affects people like in their 70s and 80s. So here flash back to 30s, like what's happening. So came into the office and everybody's kind of looking at me like, why is she here? And that's kind of what started the journey. However, um I ended up getting a second opinion, because this doctor was ready to, okay, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. You can't do this, you can't do that. And it just wasn't in my spirit what he was saying. Some of the things that he was saying, it was like, I guess this is where people say get a second opinion. And that's kind of what we did. And good thing, because I found out that I didn't have exactly multiple myeloma. I was on
Mhm.
the stepping stone of that. I actually had asymptomatic myeloma, which is smoldering myeloma. So it's
Oh.
the tip where, okay, the first doctor saw that the numbers look funky. Okay. Um, doesn't mean exactly you have cancer or the stage of, but it's perhaps leading into an issue. And that's what it was with the second opinion. So I found a highly regarded doctor. I did my little research, and some people that I knew, they actually helped me as well. And he was like one of the leading myeloma specialists in the country. And before we were doing the fax thing versus how we're kind of doing things today,
Mhm.
and I sent him over some of my what do you call it? Labs and all of those
Paperwork, yeah.
results and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, that's smoldering. So it's smoldering is like a watch and wait, which I know a lot of people in the community do not like that word because who wants to watch and wait? If you're saying I have cancer or leading to cancer, what are we waiting for? However, I was fine with that because I didn't want to do treatment. It
Mhm.
was just new. Just the whole experience was new. It was scary. So if you're saying we don't have to do anything right now, I was fine with that. So fast forward 5 years later, so I would do the labs because that's how they see what's happening. So it's not that you're watching at home and just waiting for something to happen. They are
Yeah.
watching your blood levels and all of that. And lo and behold, I had another health hiccup that spiraled. I almost died, you could say. And that's what led me into active treatment. So my myeloma had definitely reached that plateau of, okay, we gotta start. And did that whole role of chemotherapy, different shots in the stomach, just needles. I hate needles. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just any part of the body, I don't care. However, I did what people usually do, right? When they have to make that decision, and it is a hard decision. Do you go with treatment or do if you did the watch and wait, do you wait a little longer? But then that's like a battle because usually if you have a good doctor, they don't want to wait. And
Yeah.
my doctor, the second one was pretty good, or the third one, because the second one who told me no, it was smoldering, actually referred me to someone who was local, who was also a good doctor. So that's kind of how, I kind of went that way. But yeah, the third doctor who I currently still have, it was it's been a good ride. It's been up and down bumps because some things that your doctor may want you to do, and if you're a person like me with that high personality, sometimes it can be a little battle back and forth.
Yep.
However, that's a healthy thing. Um, Usually, sometimes we get caught up in things where we're scared to speak to our doctors because we hold them at such a high regard, as they are someone I guess you should hold at a high regard. However, some get it wrong sometimes, and this is my life. And we got to work together. It's
Yep.
not you just telling me what I got to do. It's got to make sense. It has to be a comfortable level because I think for the person who is afflicted with whatever, they're the ones who has to go through this journey,
Yep.
not the doctor. So, Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a powerful story, and there's some areas of your story that match a little bit with mine. Um, the first of all, the fact that the doctor followed up with you is rare, because you as well as I know that being black and being a woman in the healthcare system, they don't pay attention to us. We are rarely seen.
Mhm.
So the fact that your doctor really visualized and saw you and like, let me follow up with her, um, that's amazing, and I'm really grateful that they did, especially based on the kind of cancer that you said that you have, because it's like had he just watched and waited, we may not even be having this conversation. It's a totally different ball game, and so I'm really glad to hear that your doctor actually followed up with you. I didn't get that same kind of treatment per se with mine, and so kind of is what it is. But that being
Mhm.
said, I also waited on treatment a little bit. I decided when I got my diagnosis that one of the major things I wanted to do was have a family still. I got diagnosed at 32 with no kids. And so I was like, no, I still would like to have children. And I don't know what this is going to mean or what it's going to look like. And the crazy part about that is that I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew that I wanted to have a family. And so I don't even know where the idea came from to freeze my eggs. I just knew like I got to do something to preserve something to make sure that like when the time is right and when the time does come, I have what I need to have a child that has my DNA, and stuff like that. It can carry the bloodline, if you will, kind of.
Right.
Um, and so I took a month in between getting my diagnosis and starting treatment to go through that egg freezing process, which was a lot of needles, stabbing myself in the stomach because you got to do the hormone injections and all that. It was terrible. Um, so that was kind of crazy. But and then you also mentioned the things that the doctor wants you to do that you don't necessarily want to do, and you go back and forth. And I told myself the same thing because part of the cancer that I have is that it creates fluid in my lungs, and so the
Okay.
scary part for me is that I don't know when my medication is not working. It'll just start developing fluid again, and I'll start getting shortness of breath and stuff like that. Like that's my indicator that something is wrong. And so for a while there, when I first started taking my medicine, it hadn't kicked in fully. It takes time for your body to acclimate and for the issues and problems that you've had to kind of subside. And so I still was getting fluid in my lungs on a very regular basis, and I had to go in practically. It was almost getting to the point where it was weekly, where I'd have to go in and get a lung drain in the doctor's office, which was just awful. And so the one thing I told myself was like, I don't want a catheter. I don't want a catheter. I don't care what's going on. I'm not getting no catheter. Da 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 da. And what happened? Got a catheter. It's like,
Oh my
as much as
God.
I tried to fight it and as much as I didn't want to do it, the options were okay, you can either get this catheter and get these lung drains at home where you're comfortable, and so that we can get to the bottom of this faster, or you can keep coming to this office and going through this painful procedure by yourself in a cold, sterile doctor's office. What do you want to do? And I was like, so sometimes they present you with the choice, but it's not really a choice, if you know what I mean. Um,
Right.
but it was one of those things where it was just something that I really just didn't want that to happen. I was like, no, I refuse to do this. I don't want it to happen. And I was, a little adamant about it. It was like, I was like, no, but it became something where it's like, I had to. So I was getting lung drains 3 times a week. Usually they would average between like, I don't even remember the number, but it was definitely like 50 to 60 ounces of fluid every drain,
Oh,
um, roughly, depending. It started off pretty high, to be honest with you. I think that it was more than that. I think it was like closer to like 70, 80-ish ounces of fluid. It was
mhm.
it was it was a whole container. Um, and it was more or less like the medication can't work with the fluid in there. So it's like you really need to get the fluid down to a level where the medication has a fighting chance to work. So it's like they continued to drain and continued to drain until finally it got it to a level where the medication was like, all right, we got it from here. And so they didn't have to do that anymore. But that was I when you said that, I was like, oh man, she is speaking a word. Like I was constantly trying to battle my doctor, like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do this. Like, no, like, and stuff like that. So I definitely know how
But
it
you
is.
know,
But
it's part of the journey,
it
right?
is.
I think It's things that you want to do, and you have different types of personalities. Like some of the
Yep.
people that I've met, and sometimes it's an age thing as well, where older people, not all, but you may have older people, it's like, oh, well, I gotta follow exactly what my doctor says because he's,
Mhm.
I'm in his care, I trust his word, blah, blah, blah. In their heart, they may not necessarily agree with a lot of what they're saying, but they're going by this person with a certain expertise that, okay, I'm gonna just follow what he says. I don't agree with it, but I'll just not be vocal.
Yeah.
Honey, I am
Oh,
quite vocal. And
yes.
my doctor, like I said, we have like a relationship, and it has not been easy because I've pushed back a lot of times. And also, people have to realize when you push back, it's not to be disrespectful for their craft of what, their expertise, but this is your life. Okay. Like, we got to get this right. And I'm sure they realize that as well. But you have to be vocal to tell them if you don't understand anything what they're
Yeah.
saying. Because sometimes the doctors, they'll talk over your head. They're looking at you, but they're thinking about the next patients, one and two and three in the next room.
Yep.
And they're not, they're there, but they're not
They're not
totally
seeing
there.
you.
Okay. So you gotta like, I don't care. I'm sorry about the other people in room two and three, but right now you need to be focused here.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, we've been, but I think, I don't know if it's like, if I should say it's appreciative with this particular situation that I'm talking about, but I think it's a respect that is earned. I respect him, and I think he respects me as a patient, because again, I'm not the okay, whatever you say person, patient,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. And the other thing that people have to remember too is that doctors are human. Like, yes, they
Yeah,
went to school for several years longer than the rest of us, and they may have a specialty or an expertise, but at the end of the day, they're human, and humans make mistakes. So not everything they say is gospel, you know. And so that's the other thing that you have to remember too. So there's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion or asking questions or making them tell you something again in a way that makes sense to you, because this is your health and it's your body. Um, we
exactly.
got a question in the chat here. I'm going to throw it on the screen if I can, and then I'll read it
Okay.
out loud so that you can answer it. What if you have a doctor that is discouraging or lacks empathy when you're trying to ask questions or seek advice?
Mm, oh.
So I'll let you answer that first, and I'll jump in over top of you.
Um, well, I can't wait to have you on my show, but that's like another thing because that question, I think of my mother because my mother had lung cancer. Um, she did not have a good time. She didn't, not a good time, but she didn't have a good experience with her doctor.
Yeah,
It was horrible. So if time was permitted, for sure, I think a second opinion. Like if your doctor is straight out rude, and I get it. Some don't have the best bedside manner, but sometimes you gotta pluck the pros and the cons. Like if they are pro as they know they'll want it in terms of certain treatment or certain things that you should do, if they have those type of pros, but um I don't know, maybe they don't shake your hand when you come in a room or whatever little thing that you feel maybe a con. You kind of like see what the pros are for me keeping you and what are the cons for me to look for another opinion, like the second doctor, not the primary doctor. He was a con
yeah,
because again, he did not treat people in their 30s. Okay, so that's strike one. And strike two, some of the treatment thing that he was talking about after I did my little research, I was like, I don't want to take that, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just too gung ho. Maybe he was a good doctor for a certain target. Like his clientele, his patients were those of a certain age, which was
Yep.
older. So you have to really level it out. Um, a lot of doctors can be rude. You know, it's not to say you should accept it, but again, you just have to like waver the pros and cons, especially if they're a good doctor in their field. You know, you don't want to give up like a really good doctor who's had like a good success rate. However, you have to work with them and you have to be vocal. Like if you feel like, doc, I'm not feeling how you're talking to me, or whatever the thing is, or if you feel they're talking too quickly, and you know how that can be with doctors, they'll talk like, okay,
Breathe
I
straight
know
down,
you
and you're
have to
like,
go, okay, time out. So you're here present with me now, my little 5, 10 minutes that you're in here. Let me go through the questions that I have, which that's another thing. It's good to have your questions, especially if you have a doctor who is short with you, as like they're going over this, that, your labs is this, that. And sometimes it can intimidate you for getting your questions out, you know, and who wants to wait like another month or two to address the issues that you may be having. So I think you have to really level out, is it worth that other opinion, you know,
yeah.
to come in?
And I think in my case, I will say this. I was treating in New York, and I was treating at NYU Langone, which is a top facility for treating, lung cancer. I had a specialist who was great, like, top in his field and stuff like that. And I had a second opinion from Memorial Sloan Kettering, so I had two big contenders in New York that were my original treatment team. I moved to Savannah, Georgia, and I started treating down here. And I left the whole healthcare system down here and started treating in South Carolina because I was like, here's what you're not going to do. Like, I was not getting the type of care that I needed. It wasn't that he was discouraging questions. It was that the bedside manner wasn't there. I felt like a number. I felt so much like a number that I was like, he had like, I think I'm not even going to exaggerate. I'm going to tell you guys the exact number. They said they had over 40 patients for that day. And if you break down an 8 hour, like we'll just say 9 to 5, because that's a typical day, that's a typical work day for, a doctor. 40 patients in an 8 hour workday, minus maybe an
Mhm,
hour for lunch, 7 hour workday. You're talking 5 to 6 patients an hour in a
mhm,
60-hour time frame, a 60-minute time frame, not including the wait time in the waiting room, not including check-in times and all that kind of stuff, the admin process. So already you're cutting your time. And I'm like, this disease can and will take me out at some point. I don't like to think that. But I
mhm.
also know that this is important to me. And I need somebody on my care team who understands the importance of how serious this is to me. And if you can't give me the time of day to answer the questions that I have and take time to explain things to me in a way that makes sense so I understand what's going on within my body, then I will drive 2 hours to go treat at another facility with a doctor who will. Because at the
Right.
end of the day, I will say this. I remember somebody was looking at me crazy, like, you go all the way to Charleston just to get treated. I was like, mm hmm. And I don't complain. I don't complain at all because I will tell you the first time that I went to that facility in South Carolina and I did a comparison for how I felt after leaving a Savannah doctor to how I felt leaving a Charleston doctor was night and day. I wanted
Wow.
to cry with frustration in Savannah. I wanted to cry happy tears leaving out of Charleston because I felt seen and I felt like the doctor recognized me and understood what I was going through. I didn't have to say, hey, look at me. I need an extra few minutes in your schedule so you can talk to me. It was like, no, what other questions do you have? Let's talk about your history. Like, they literally took time to get to know me. They gave me ice water. I was like, oh, it's like ice water and a warm blanket for the CT scan. I was like, "Oh my god, this is a Louis Vuitton hospital." Like, I really felt important. And that goes when you have a cancer or you have a disease or you have something that dictates a lot of how you live your life, having a care team that cares about you and that pays attention to you and that is giving you the care that you need is literally you can't put a price on it. It literally is the most important thing, and it makes you feel, it just takes one thing off your plate. You got enough to worry about when you're thinking about all these things that you have going on with you. The last thing you need to think about is, damn, did my doctor miss something? Like, and I felt like that treating out here, even though the doctor is 5 minutes down the street from me. I felt like these people were so lax that they were going to miss something in my care and I was going to be taken out of this life early because they weren't paying attention. And I was like,
Right.
no, no, I can't do that. And so, you know, yeah, everything that Yolanda said too, if it's a top specialist, sometimes when you have rare conditions and you have a specialist, sometimes you got to hold on to them, even if they're rude or they're discouraging. Sometimes you just need to bring somebody with you that will boost you up where the doctor doesn't,
Hmm.
but don't lose sight or don't lose hold of a really, really good specialist and somebody who could potentially mean the difference between life and death for you, over them discouraging, and stuff like that. Like, just bring somebody with you that can boost you up, and make you feel better and stuff like that. But also make sure you take, like she said, like you take account of how you feel. Like if you feel like you're not getting the service that you need or the healthcare service that you deserve, then keep it moving. Because at the end of the day, you're paying this person like a lot of money. So I could be paying a lot of money to somebody else who I at least feel like I'm getting something out of it. Like, I would hate to be paying a ton of money for cancer treatment to a doctor who literally is paying me zero attention. I'm like, well, I could just open my window and just shoot money out the window if this is what I wanted to do.
Right.
Like you have to take an active role in your healthcare and in your journey. And sometimes that means having the hard conversation with your doctor, or it means breaking up with your doctor altogether because they're just not serving you properly.
Right.
So that would be my advice to you, Beanie D. But I thank you for the question because that was a really good, you know, it's
Yes,
a
it
good thing. A lot
was.
of people ask that. Yeah. Um, so I wanted to, I mean, it sounds like before diagnosis, your life was pretty full and fun and exciting. You were doing a whole lot of stuff. So, what part of your life after your diagnosis were you able to reclaim? Like me, I take pride in the fact that like I really try not to let my disease stop me. I just, I sit down if I need to, but for the most part, I keep moving forward. I don't let it slow me down as much as I possibly can. So, I want to know how much of your life you've reclaimed since that day that you got diagnosed.
Well, it's funny because I started treatment when I was still in the fashion industry. So I was still going to work,
Mhm.
being stressed, you know, going early in the morning, if I had before the actual treatment, but to do the labs and stuff like that, I think I had to go every week or something. So I was still doing that, always to the office early. So no one knew the difference. Okay. No one
Yep.
knew that I had multiple myeloma. No one knew I had cancer because first it's none of your business. Okay, that was my whole thing.
Yep.
So we're gonna be incognito because you don't need to know all of that. And you're one of the reasons why I'm stressed. So why am I giving you that, opening my shield to give that for you to like use that against me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. So I was like, just doing life, continuing as I needed to. If I was traveling, okay, you have a conversation with my doctor. Okay, I'm getting ready to get on this plane. What should I think about, in terms of those whole blood clot situations and just like all of these different conversations that you don't have to worry about before you get in this predicament. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And, okay, this you giving me this advice. Okay, cool. So I can still get on a plane. Okay, cool. Those kind of conversations. So basically I've continued living life as I still do to this day. However, as I say, the body does what the body does, like you telling me I'm sick, but I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yep.
And then something happens. I don't. think sometimes we realize how delicate our bodies are. I think if we knew or if we know from earlier on, maybe we treat it a little bit more kinder, you know. Um, Stress is a killer. For me, I feel like that probably was something that activated. They say that usually you may have those dormant cells.
Yep.
Okay, they just waiting.
Mm.
And if you're lucky, you may not even be plagued with it to activate. But honey, I truly believe it's like if you overly if the stress level is a 10 and you on 20, is any time that something crazy may take place. And I think for me, that may have been it. Plus, I think there was other factors as well because with multiple myeloma, they don't really know the reason. And it kills me when they don't know the reason of why you get these hideous things.
Same.
But I know years ago, I grew up in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, New York, and we lived near a cleaners. And I remember coming home from school, and the fumes just like vaporizing the whole home. But you don't think of anything. You just, hmm and just kind of move it.
Keep moving.
And then we moved to another place, again, that was near a cleaners. Now, who knows? Could that have something to do with it? I don't know. And it doesn't help when the doctors don't know. So it's just like with the COVID, nobody knows. But here, let's do this treatment. Like you kind of want to know how you got to this. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So it that can be frustrating. But back to your question, yeah, I just we cried in the beginning. Like when you hear cancer, come on, that just messes up your whole psyche.
Yeah.
That's like that's it's crazy. And then with multiple myeloma, like you do your research, they're telling you in 5 years you can die from this. You know what I'm saying? But let me give you some positive stuff. Okay, because I don't know if you're going to get on that, but I'm jumping the gun, so I apologize. But they don't tell you that a lot of these statistics are based off of white male of a certain age, which understandably, that's why it's deemed that if you're in your 70s or 80s,
Hmm.
it's more prone that you may get multiple myeloma. Okay, that's one. Two, not many people of color are in these clinical trials.
That's a whole nother
Okay,
conversation.
so when you do those Google searches or whatever research you're doing, they're not really thinking of Black people per se, part of these numbers. So, yeah, it's a very deadly situation.
Yeah.
However, there is hope. But when you look at those statistics, that just blows your mind that you just know that this is it. And I just made that after we did the crying because we was doing the boohooing a little. And then I was like, yo, I have so much stuff that I want to do. You know what I'm saying? And I've been doing it. Okay. I've been doing it. So yeah, child. Mm,
I see so much of myself in you. It's so funny. We have the same sort of mindset, like I mean, listen, I got my diagnosis in New York too. And
mhm.
I every day, and again, they don't know, non-smoker, 32 years old, healthy, active, never been in the hospital, no asthma, no allergies, no history of cancer in my family. I have stage 4 lung cancer. How, Sway? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and the doctors don't know where it came from, so I go down that rabbit hole all the time. Is it from me scooping kitty litter all the time? Was I
Right,
living in a house that had radon and didn't know it? I lived in New
right.
York. Was it subway? Was it 9/11 fumes? Like, was it taxi cab gas emissions? Like, it could be so many things. Was it stress? Because Lord, when I tell you, New York was a stressful time in my life. It absolutely was stressful. Um, maybe it was a perfect storm of all of those factors put together. And like you said, it switched on that switch that I wish never existed in the first place. But, it does, it does mess with you when the doctors don't know. It's one of those double-edged swords because it's almost like I don't wanna know because, like, what if they do say, "Oh, it's your cats?" And I'm like, "Oh, like, damn." Like, you know
You
what I
gotta
mean? Or like,
go.
like, "Dang," like, for real? Or like, what if they, if they say it's something that I'm like, "Oh, wow." Um so it's one of those things where you almost don't wanna know, but you do at the same time, but, the doctors just have no idea where it came from. But what you said makes 100% sense. Hearing that word cancer, and I had the boohoo's too. I don't cry very often. I have moments, but I try not to live in that space. Like, I try to live in a positive mindset, and I honestly feel like, and I say this all the time, like, for people that have cancer, like, I feel like I'm one of those people that's gonna be like, "Damn, are you still here?" "Sure am. Sure am." Like, if anybody could be around for a super unnecessarily long time with this disease, I feel like I'm that person. Um, but I mean, hearing that word, it pierces your mortality bubble. Like, we all walk around this world thinking that we're immortal, until something happens to us. Even, as kids, we're fine until we break a bone. Once you break a
Right.
bone, it's like you open the floodgates at that point, and or just once you have a near death experience or once you have an accident or anytime something significant happens to you where your life flashes before your eyes, intense pain, intense trauma, it it makes that bubble a little bit less strong. It
It
just kind of
does.
reminds you like, hey, we're mortal and things can happen to us. And so
It
hearing that
does.
cancer word and then adding the level of unknowing that we have to it, where it's like we don't know where it came from or why it's here, that really just it makes the bubble feel extremely fragile. It almost feels like, the most I don't even know, the most sensitive possible thing. I would almost say it's like an egg, but even an egg is probably tougher than a bubble when you think about it. So,
Right.
but
It's
it
it's
does something to that bubble.
it's let me tell you. So I've had three people, it's like how to start this conversation. I remember when I was young, you know, and my mother, she always instilled in me that, sweetheart, one day we're going to die.
Yeah.
There's no overlooking this or that. It's just a question, will you live younger, older, or whatever the case was. So being so young and hearing that, it's kind of like you don't really grasp, okay, what is death? You know that the person will no longer be here, but you don't, the whole spiritual aspect of it, maybe that wasn't quite broken down or whatever, or maybe it was. Now,
Yeah.
I've lost a close friend at what, 23 maybe, from lupus. Okay. She was able to have her son before she passed away and she got married. So I felt like she did her whole life within a short period of time.
Yeah.
I've lost my best friend from renal disease a few years ago. And then I lost my mom from lung cancer. So it's just kind of like, and then of course there's
Oh,
the other family and friends and all of that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of like seeing that and knowing that literally we don't have that much time. So if you're trying to do stuff, don't look at it, oh, I'll do it in another year. You really got to do that now because it's not
yeah.
guaranteed. It really isn't. And when you think of life that way, when you're afflicted with cancer or any chronic whatever, you kind of look at things a little differently. That, okay, some things are out of your control, but you know what? Some things are still in my control. So I'm going to see if I can do X, Y, and Z, despite the
Yeah.
odds of me completing it or whatever the case is may be dim, but I'm going to try it anyway. So,
Yep. It's like you're presented with two choices. You either curl up in a ball and boo-hoo yourself until you're no longer here, or you say, "Okay, that happened. Let's let's adjust, let's come back, and let's keep on moving forward, And I took the second path, and it sounds like you took the second path too. Because honestly, it's like I got stuff to do. Like I still got to get to work. Like what are we talking about? Like
You know?
life must go on. Um, so I do want to give you a second though to talk about your books because you're a twice published author at this point, and so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about both of those. We're about almost done with the show, but we still have a few more things to go over. But I want to make sure I give you
Okay.
adequate time to talk about both of those before we do.
Okay. So the first book that I wrote, oh man, when was that? I think that was maybe 2003 or 2005. I don't even remember. It's called The Ins and Outs of the Fashion Industry from a Fashion Insider. And it was just my memoir, if you will, of my time as being a Black woman in the fashion industry, and especially in the area that I was in, product development, technical design, like I said, like all of those different titles and stuff like that. So I had a hard time, yo. I'm not gonna lie. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough, and there weren't a lot of people like me. I probably, if I was in a company, I'd probably be the only Black woman there. So you
Oh
can
wow.
imagine those types of trials and tribulations within that. Um, so I wrote my little stories of basically the ins and outs, just as it says. And then, of course, I get diagnosed with multiple myeloma or smoldering at that time. And I was like, I want to write a book. I want to write a second book.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that came about just the year before my mom passed away. And I didn't tell her right away that I had multiple myeloma. So literally, I don't even know the timeline, but I'll say she passed away in 2010. I want to say maybe the end of 2009 or the beginning of 2010. That's when I told her, you know. So there was a little stretch from the time that we were trying to figure out what was happening for me sharing that, with her. But when I told her, she was like, and I was like thinking of doing a book. She was like, "Well, go ahead, hurry up," and because there was like a part where I kind of got stuck on certain things, and she was like, "Well, when are you gonna finish this book and stuff like that?" And it's just like, you think about it now, she didn't even make it to like see the book, the second book. But that was kind of like my little footprint to leave for those who look like me or not, young, definitely for the younger versions, where you have an imprint where you can like reference. Because when I was diagnosed, there really wasn't any good reference. There were some people that I tried to
Yeah.
reach out to. A lot of people are not bubbly or want to be bothered. They're in this funk, which is definitely understandable, and some just don't want to be bothered. Like they're trying to
Yeah.
figure their journey. They don't have time to conversate, and which I totally get, you know. So me writing the second book was my um, leave back for those who want to know what I went through to help
Damn, I
them
really need
along
to
the
write a
way.
book. I've been
Go ahead,
meaning
write
to
that
write a
book,
book.
girl. Write that book.
And the crazy part is I've kept a journal from oh god, I had a live journal back in the day, which is really old. That's like I want to say maybe pre MySpace, and like
Okay.
it was like awkward like junior high into high school times. Like, but I've had some serious some life hiccups from junior high to today, of course. And I have a journal that has documented a lot of it. And so I'm like, man, I really should find a way to put this into a book. But I just, you think about it and you get intimidated by how much work it is to actually write a book. But you
Do
just
it.
got to start.
It's work. It's work, but you know what? So what?
Yeah.
And
So, well,
it's
where can
best
people
for
find
you
your
to
books,
tell
though?
your story than someone else, or your story not to be told at all, right?
You're true. That's true. Absolutely true. But where can people find your books at? Like, where can we go and purchase?
Um, Barnes and Noble, I believe online,
Okay,
Amazon, and for the second book is Amazon for sure, and it's my website. Hold on, I'm so sorry. It's
that's okay.
www.madaboutmyeloma.com.
Got it. All right, and I'll make sure I get that up on the link itself. So, folks, if you revisit this after we've aired and you're interested in more information, I'll put the links in the comment section and as well in the archive footage also. So that'll be in there. But I we got to talk about your business now. You have a whole entire business, Spitfire Productions. So let's talk about that and where that came from and what you're doing with that and everything else so that people have an idea of where that came from.
First off, I want to give you kudos for even saying the name right because usually that's a trial. Is it Spitfire? No, it's Spit Girl. It's Spitfire.
I was
Drop the E. Okay.
That's what
So
I
thank
thought,
you
and
for
I was
that.
like, "Man, I didn't ask her that in the beginning." I was like, "Imma just
Right,
go with it."
right. Girl, you the girl. Thank you for that.
I try.
So Spitfire, so Spitfire Productions is basically my it's my brand. So I again been in the fashion industry, so I help coach other smaller businesses that need like a leg up of what direction they should go with their businesses. Um, and from that particular business, it's kind of branched into other things. Like I said, I've always been a serial entrepreneur. I
Yep.
remember having a newsletter that I used to have. What was it? The Laundry Source many moons ago. Like when I think and reflect about my life, like, yo, I did a lot of stuff. Okay. And it's not to like pat myself on the shoulder. It's just like it was a lot going on because part of me felt like just in case, time runs out, I want to do this, I want to do that, and just kind of doing it. So, Spitfire Productions has also branched into other things that I wanted to do. I have a nonprofit in memory of my mother called May's Breath. Okay, so I'm all about advocacy and lung cancer that until I die. So that's my goal of what for sure, definitely. So that's a 501c3 organization. So that's under Spitfire as
Mhm.
well. Um, and then I had a shoe blog. I haven't done that in a couple of years because those who know me know I love a shoe. Um, things have changed, over the years since I'm not really in on fashion Seventh Avenue like that. So I still got the shoes, but it ain't that serious like it was a couple of years ago. And so part of my journey, I became a certified personal trainer. So my business is called Chronic Fitness. Again, it's under Spitfire Productions.
You're
And
awesome.
I work with people like us, if you will, people who have some type of chronic ailment, but not as dire, who can still put some type of physical activity in their day to day. So yeah, child.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I have the what do you call it? The Instagram series that I started called No Better Time Than the Present. So that's a series I started this year. There was some other projects that I was working on. Um, and that's too long of a story, but I wanted something, I felt something in my heart to do this series. And I wanted to take advantage of this Instagram live thing, majiggy,
Yep.
and it's working out very well. I'm hooking up some very spectacular guests, to hear their journeys, whether it's people in multiple myeloma, breast cancer, MS. I'll have you later this year. So it's just different stories. that I would want them to share with, a segment of people, not just people in the myeloma end, but just to hear everyone's story. And this is for patient advocates, if you will, or not really patient advocates, but yeah, patient advocates, because not everyone has that, not everyone is as vocal as you and I may be, right? So what do we do about those people? We have to be the voice
Hmm.
a little, or the front voice for them, to give them that courage to ask those questions of their medical team, right? So if they see us, like whether it's Instagram Live or whatever your social media means, and they see us making a go, asking the questions or what have you, it's just, I think it helps motivate them for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't get it twisted. It took me a minute to start talking about it. I had to have a come to Jesus moment myself. I was keeping it very close to my chest, not doing anything to help the stigma, of course. But I am past that now at this point. I am a very loud advocate, very vocal about lung cancer. It's part of who I am now, but it's not all of who I am. Like I like
Right.
to make that distinction. Like this, it's not just that. Like I have a lot more going on than just that. But yeah, it took me a long time. And so I understand the people that don't want to talk about it and the people that are in that bubble. I understand because I was there for a little bit, not a long time,
Right.
but I was there for a little while I figured out, you know, what, like why, like trying to I still have yet to figure out why. I have some ideas, but I just really was trying to get my whole arms around this whole entire just sort of bombshell that fell in my lap. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that, but I still come to terms every day a little bit with it. And it's one of those things that I think is going to be an ongoing process. It's not something that's just going to be like, yes, tomorrow I am coming to terms with what I have going on. It's something that is going to be it's a long game. It's not a short game here. So, um, but
For
yeah, so I
sure.
wanted to, before we close, I wanted to just give us a moment to talk about mental health because it is
Mm.
very easy, like you mentioned earlier, to get into these bubbles where, you know, it's hard having a diagnosis like this or having a condition, and not just diagnosis people, but unseen conditions that, you know, go unnoticed because you quote unquote look fine on the outside, but inside
Right.
you're in pain or you're struggling or you're hurting. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about maybe some of the best practices that you've put into place or some of the things that have helped you to maintain your not necessarily positive attitude, because I feel like positive attitude can sometimes be a weight or an anchor. It kind of takes away from your ability to have bad days. Um, but some of the things that have made you mentally strong while dealing with this
Mm.
journey and being in this space, if you will.
Wow.
I know it's a loaded question. I'm sorry. Gotta hit you with at least one of them.
you know, just one. I think, I don't know. Like you said, like we have our moments. Not everyone is bubbly, for sure, which is understandable. Um,
Yeah,
you have to walk in your own journey of how you want to move forward. And the path is not a straight path. Everyone's path is different. And it's not straight, it's going to be crooked, diagonal, sideways, all of these different ways. And it's okay. Um, just one little part that I want to add, and I'll get back to what you had asked was,
absolutely.
though not everyone may be of out there patient advocate, which is totally fine. And I don't even, to be honest, know how I even got here. Anyone knows me in public speaking, oh my Jesus. I can remember like being in meetings, and it, even if it's like five of us, and it's like, I gotta talk. Okay, I gotta do this whole presentation, like say what. And now I'm out here talking to these strangers, but not really strangers, because we do have a common connection to some
Yep.
degree. You know what I'm saying? So I get if, well, I don't want to like do all of that of what she's doing, which is fine. My whole thing when I say advocacy, it's also being vocal with your doctor. That's the most important thing. Later, for being on a TV show or doing a radio interview or whatever you're doing, it's just having a vocal conversation with your medical team, and don't have those questions in your head.
Yeah.
Just be vocal with it, and that's showing your advocacy right there, because self advocacy, you're speaking for yourself, not someone else speaking for you. Now, back to your question, mental health. Um, I think it's like a day by day thing. Um, I'm always busy. I'm always on my busy, but my busy is different these days. It's something that I enjoy doing. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. It's a different stress than the years I put in corporate America. It's like it's a whole different kind of stress. This is kind of like, okay, if I don't feel like doing that today, that's fine. We'll try tomorrow. If I want to eat this today, okay, well, we'll cut back next week. It's like a whole different thing. So I think in terms of mental health, not beating myself too much on a bad day. We can all have a bad day. You don't feel like being bothered. That's fine. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think to add to that, and I'll give some, of my own mental health things. I think what really messes us up as not just us, but human beings in general is when reality comes face to face with our expectations.
Yes.
There's that intersection between those two that usually in the words of, it really messes you up, right? So I think that for me, one of the things that help with my mental health is like, you get a diagnosis like this, you start thinking about all the things you can't do and all the things you haven't
Hmm.
done and whatnot. And I think that one of the things that helped me was understanding that just because I have this diagnosis, it doesn't mean I can't still do those things. It just means
Right.
that that process may look a little bit different. And so I had to really come to terms with, okay, Jamie, are you somebody who's more concerned about the process or the end result? Because as
Right.
long as you're only concerned about the end result, it doesn't matter how you get from point A to point B. What matters is that you got there. And so for me, coming to terms with that and really taking a hard look at my goals and my expectations to realize, okay, I really just wanted, the feeling of doing X, Y, and Z. I didn't really necessarily care about the outcome, or I really just wanted the outcome and didn't necessarily care about the process. Once I started to come to terms with those things and realize what was more important to me, it made it a lot easier to not be so down on myself about this diagnosis, because I
Hmm.
realized that yes, it's just an obstacle in the way of my goal. It's not necessarily the end of my story at all. Cancer is not a sentence. It's a period. It's a sentence. So,
Hmm.
or whatever that phrase is. I probably said that wrong. Whatever.
Yeah, I know what you mean, though.
It ain't the end all be all, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So once I came to terms with that and understood that, it helped me, tremendously with keeping my mental right and like just being like, hey, I'm still gonna do it. Like, I'm still gonna be a mom. I'm still gonna
Hmm.
do X, Y, and Z. I still got married. I still did all these things. So like it didn't change all of that, and I savor those moments a little bit more because they have happened in spite of, you know. And the other thing is just like you said too, I'm actively doing things that make me happy.
Right.
Like I actively seek out things that reduce my stress level, and that includes jobs. Like I've learned to say no to things. I'm like, you know, I just don't want to do that. Like
Right.
before
Right.
you get plagued with this feeling that you have to say yes to things and that you have to be everything to everybody, but you can't be everything to everyone. Like
Right.
what's the phrase? You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And
Right.
so I learned to say no to some things that I'm like, that really is just not something I need. I don't need to take that onto my plate. I'm just not interested at this point. And I don't give myself guilt over it. And there are some days where I'm a wonderful employee and there are other days where I am really not great. I'm like, you know what, we'll be back at it
Exactly.
again tomorrow. Um And that's with everything. There's some days that you're able to give it 100% and some days that you're like, I really phoned it in on that one, but tomorrow I'll be better. And that's kind of how I look at things, and that's how sort of how I just keep my everything within focus, because you have to let go of this idea that everything has to be perfect, has to be on this
Hmm.
perfect timeline, it has to be in this perfect trajectory. Life is messy and it's not a straight line. Like you said, it sometimes takes you around in circles and back a couple steps, and then you shoot forward a whole bunch more, and you just have to kind of learn to just strap in and enjoy the ride and take it for what it is. And when I stopped putting so much, emphasis on expectations and just started to look at reality, everything kind of was just seems to be okay. And that for me
Right.
seems to work. So I don't know if that's gonna work for anybody else, but just like Cat Williams, you say, get in touch with your star player. I love that phrase, like your star player. Get in touch with them.
You
Um,
know,
but is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners before we close? I'm going to give you an opportunity to shout out your contact information as well, if anybody wants to connect with you offline for anything as well.
okay. Well, I just want to say for those tuning in, um, life is not easy. If it's not illness, perhaps it could be something else. You just don't know.
Yeah.
I know that you just have to live life to the fullest. And whatever that means for you is whatever that means for you. My story is my story, Jamie's story is Jamie's story. But it's okay. This, I think my mom used to say this, or my grandmother, but this too shall pass. And whatever you think that means in there is whatever it is. Like, okay, I have multiple myeloma. Which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned I'm in remission. Oh,
Oh,
I forgot about
that's
that.
important, girl. You need to
I,
lead with that.
I should have said that in the beginning. Sorry.
Right? Start the conversation with that right there. Like,
Yeah, and I just pray that's with that. That's still every year. You got to get all these major tests to make sure it's still there. But
yes,
thank you,
yes,
Jesus. But it's I kind of look at it as okay. Why am I still here where others are not? And how do I want to use my time that I'm here? So if it means me being the voice that you need to be, then so be it. But I will say for those who are newly diagnosed, let's say with a multiple myeloma or any cancer or whatever, you just take one day at a time. You take one day at a time, and you will figure out the path that you need to, move forward on this journey.
yep, absolutely. And so, my dear, where can people find you and follow you if they want to get in touch with you and just talk about your journey with you, or get you on their shows so you can continue being an advocate, or purchase your books, of course? One more time for those links.
Oh, thank you. So they can reach me. My website is www.madaboutmyeloma.com, and Twitter is at madaboutmyeloma. My Instagram is myeloma chick with a K at the chick. And Facebook is another face of multiple myeloma.
All right. Well, I'll make sure I get all those links into our archive for this show. I want to thank you so much for just connecting with me. And, I'm glad that something I said resonated with you, because it resulted in this really amazing episode. So I appreciate your time
Thank
tonight and
you.
just being there and everything that you're doing to advocate for what you're doing. And yes, with the remission, next time, start the
I
conversation with the
know, my bad.
remission. That's kind of important. And shame on me for not asking, I guess. But I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
And folks, we'll be back again with another new episode. So make sure you keep it locked. I have some really great people that I'm connecting with, and I'm excited to bring them to the show. Make sure you connect with WJMS Media on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and check into TikTok. We do a little bit of fun stuff on TikTok too. So, and there's also all the archives for this show are on YouTube as well. So if you want to watch some more episodes and catch up with some of the things you may have missed, make sure you go check out WJMS Media over there as well. Again, want to thank the folks that gave us comments today, Beanie D in the chat. We appreciate you for asking questions and thank you for tuning in. All the folks that listen through Facebook as well, thank you for tuning in as well. And we will be back again. Until then, everybody stay safe and we'll see you next time right here on WJMS Media.